That's good. Yes. Because this is just too small for me to see. Okay, so good evening, everyone. And so we'll have a talk tonight, and it'll be partly talk, partly meditation. We'll do some meditation as well, and then there'll be time at the end for questions. But I thought it would be good to start with a little meditation. Some of you may have been running around today, working, and mine might be a little frazzled from what you were doing today. So it's good to take a little bit of time to settle the mind down and get into this space and also generate a good motivation for being here. So make yourself comfortable, but not too comfortable. You don't want to fall asleep. So it's good if you can have your back straight, sit up straight. And I thought to take you through a guided relaxation, going through the body from head to toe, and not too slowly, but checking to see if there's any tension anywhere in the body. And if there is, then just trying to let it go, trying to relax that tension. Okay, so I'll mention different parts of the body, and as I do, put your awareness at that place. And if you notice tension there, see if you can release it, let it go. So, first, start with the top of your head. Feel the top of your head and relax any tension there may be there. Then let your awareness slide down from there to your forehead. Feel your forehead. Let your forehead be smooth and relaxed, not wrinkled with worry lines. And then feel your eyes. Relax the muscles around your eyes and behind your eyes. And then relax the other muscles in your face. Let your face be relaxed. That includes your mouth and jaw. And then move awareness around to the right side of your head. Relax that area. And then the back of your head. And then the left side of your head. Now go inside of your head with your awareness. Relax your brain, all the neurons, the nerves, all the parts of your brain. Let them relax, let go of any tension. So let the whole of your head, outside and inside, be as relaxed as possible. And then let your awareness move down into your neck. Relax the back of your neck, front of your neck, and next feel your shoulders, the tops of your shoulders, and the upper part of your back. That's an area where we sometimes feel tense, especially if we're working at a desk, on a computer. If there's any tension in that area, release it, let it go. Then continue to let your awareness travel down your back. Relax the middle part of your back. You can imagine giving yourself a massage with your mind, just letting go of any tension in your back. In the lower part of your back. If there's any tension, you can imagine that it drains out of you. It becomes like liquid and flows down and out and into the earth, disappearing there. And then move your awareness to the front part of your body. Relax your chest. Go inside of your chest. Relax your lungs, your heart. And let the awareness continue moving down through the middle part of your body, relaxing the different organs, your stomach and digestive system. Let any tension melt, flow out of you, and sink into the earth. And go all the way down to the pelvic area. Relax your hips and all those internal organs in the pelvic area. Then let your awareness move down into your legs. Relax the upper parts of the legs, your thighs. Relax your knees. And the lower parts of the legs. And finally, your feet. all the way down to your toes. Again, any tension melts and flows down, sinks into the earth, and disappears. Now, move your awareness to your right arm, the upper part of your right arm. Relax that area, all the muscles. Do your best to let go of any tension. And do the same with the lower part of your arm. And then your hand and fingers. And then move your awareness to the upper part of your left arm. Relax that area. Let go of any tension. And then the lower part of the arm. And your wrist, hand, and fingers. So now turn your awareness to your breathing. Just let your breath flow in and out in a natural rhythm. Just let your body breathe as it naturally does. And try to follow your breath with your mind, your awareness. Try to stay with each inhalation and then each exhalation. If your mind gets distracted to something else, a sound or a thought, a memory, just let go of that other object and come back to the breath. We'll just do that for a few minutes to help your mind settle down and be here in the present place and present moment. And now let's take a few more moments to think about why we're here and have a positive motivation for being here. So, we're here to look at the topic of compassion, how to have compassion, even in difficult times when facing difficult problems. So, compassion is a very positive, virtuous state of mind, brings peace, happiness, benefit to ourselves and to others and to the world. So, if we can have more compassion in our mind, we'll be happier, healthier. We'll have more positive energy to share with others and the world. Let's see if you can have that as your reason, your motivation for being here, the wish to be of benefit, not just to yourselves, but to others, people in your life, your family, friends, neighbors, people you work with, and so on, and the world in general, to be able to have more positive energy that you can send out, try to make a difference, try to bring more peace and happiness to the world. If it's difficult to feel that it's possible, it's doable to have positive energy to send out to others, then try at least to feel that you would like to learn something here that will help you to be happier, more peaceful, more balanced person. Because if we can succeed in doing that, then naturally we will have more positive energy, be less likely to hurt others and more likely to help others. You can use your own thoughts, your own words to generate such a motivation. But yeah, try your best to have a positive, beneficial, altruistic motivation as your reason for being here. So we'll have time to do more meditation later. And also, there should be time at the end for questions and answers. But I'll first talk for a while and explain my thoughts about this topic. So I chose this topic because I love it. I love compassion and talking about compassion. And it helps me to have more compassion, to feel more compassion. And I hope it will help others to feel it as well. Because I am really convinced that it is something beneficial for everybody. And it's especially needed now with all the difficult things happening in the world. But it's also difficult when there are so many problems in the world or problems in our own life. Then it's sometimes hard to hold on to compassion and easy to lose it. So I hope that I will be able to share tonight some advice, ideas on how you can maintain compassion even at difficult times and with difficult people. So I thought to start by just explaining what compassion is, so we're all on the same page. So in Buddhism, there's a lot of talk in Buddhism about compassion. And I was just thinking earlier that that's, I think for me personally, one of the things that attracted me so much to Buddhism. I mean, I think most religions, most spiritual traditions talk about compassion, have that as a value. But Buddhism teaches us to have compassion not only for people, for human beings, but for all living beings, including animals, birds, insects, everything that lives, everything that has sentience, sentient beings. And that really blew my mind when I encountered it. That just felt right to me. And I remember too, there was one incident when I first started learning Buddhism. I was in Dharamsala, going to classes at the Tibetan library. The teacher there was Geshe Darge. And I had a room kind of near the library. And one day I was just kind of walking around and I saw him, this teacher, walking around with his prayer beads, saying mantras. And at one point he stopped and bent down and picked up some little insect, like a worm or something that was on the path. And he just gently put it to the side on the grass. And I don't think I'd ever seen anyone do that kind of thing before. And I was just, wow. And also impressed that, he was a venerable teacher. We would go into class and bow to him, and, everybody treated him with a great deal of respect. He was this really special Lama, special teacher. But to notice a little insect and pick it up and, put it in a safe place was such an act of compassion and humility that it just really, really, yeah, really impressed me. And yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I was so attracted to, especially Tibetan Buddhism, because it really has a lot of teachings and practices about compassion. And the Dalai Lama, um, the spiritual head of Tibet, is considered a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, also known as Chenrezig, Kuan Yin. There's many images around of Avalokiteshvara. So the Dalai Lama is said to be a living embodiment of that. And he himself is incredibly compassionate. So there just seems to be Tibetans and Tibetan Buddhism just kind of it's oozing, oozing with compassion everywhere you look. I found that really attractive. Anyway, so the way compassion is explained in Buddhism is that it's the wish for others to be free of suffering, the wish for sentient beings to be free of suffering. And then, some people might think, well, others? What about me? Should I have compassion for myself or not? And this is something that isn't traditionally mentioned in the traditional teachings. They don't, it's always others, compassion for others, love for others, no mention of oneself. And in recent years, teachers like the Dalai Lama have been told that there's a lot of people who don't have compassion for themselves and actually hate themselves. Um, and apparently, the story is when this was first explained to the Dalai Lama at a conference of Western Buddhist teachers and psychologists, and they were talking about this problem, and the Dalai Lama was like puzzled. He didn't understand what they were talking about. The Tibetan translator had to explain for a while, and then he got it, and he was like surprised that there were people who hated themselves, who didn't like themselves, and was like, "What?" And he asked the people in the room, how many of you have this problem? And almost everyone put up their hand. And some of them were professional people, psychologists, teachers, and so on. So, um, after that, he when talking about love and compassion, he would make a point of saying we do have to have compassion for ourselves. We do have to love ourselves and have compassion for ourselves, because if we don't, we won't be able to really have love and compassion for others. So he and a number of other contemporary teachers have realized the need to teach people to have compassion for themselves and not only for others. And yeah, so it should be, I mean, they do often say compassion for all sentient beings, and we are a sentient being too. So, so maybe it isn't always necessary to specifically mention ourselves, but just include ourselves in all sentient beings. And so that's how it's explained in traditional Buddhist texts. And it is considered an essential quality to develop if you want to follow the spiritual path and attain the goals like nirvana, enlightenment, um, and even, yeah, more short-term goals like good rebirths in future lives, happiness in this life. So compassion is important for those goals that we work for. Um, and in recent years in the West, I don't know about other countries, but here in the U.S., there's been an interest in compassion. And scientists, some scientists at least, and researchers have been doing research on compassion. And the research shows that there are numerous benefits of compassion. I'll talk about those later. But this has led to um, programs. Several programs have been developed to train people in compassion. So, one of these is the compassion cultivation training that was developed at Stanford University. Some of you may have heard of that. Apparently, it's very popular, very well received. Another is uh, it's called Cognitively Based Compassion Training, CBCT, Emory University in Georgia, I believe. Georgia? Um, so that's another, it's been going 20 years now. And there's also some therapies I've heard of, compassion-based therapies. Um, so it's really wonderful that compassion is getting out there more in professional life and academic life and so on, and made more available for people to learn, especially professionals, people, or healthcare workers. They doctors, nurses, psychologists, and so on, people who are working with other people, um, and find it sometimes difficult to maintain compassion. So it's wonderful that they have opportunities to train themselves in compassion so they don't lose it and get burned out. And so there's a book called A Fearless Heart by Thupten Jinpa. I don't know if any of you have read that book. It's beautiful. Thupten Jinpa is a Tibetan scholar, Geshe. He has a Geshe degree. He also has a PhD from Oxford or Cambridge, I'm not sure, in Western, I don't know if it's Western psychology or Western philosophy. Anyway, he's quite a scholar, and he's one of the people who helped to put together the compassion program at Stanford. And he wrote this book, A Fearless Heart, telling the story behind that project, and also explaining some of the components of that program, like what they teach people. And in that book, um, compassion, there's an explanation of compassion that's a little bit different than the Buddhist one, not totally, but a little bit. Um, and this is coming from contemporary science and research. Compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to see that suffering relieved. I'll read it again. Compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we are confronted with another's suffering and we feel motivated to see that suffering relieved. I think it's kind of a more complete explanation of compassion than the Tibetan one. Not different, but just a little bit more detailed. And in his book, he also explains the difference between empathy and compassion. And I think there's a lot of discussion about this and different points of view. Um, but anyway, according to his research and program, the explanation is that empathy is feeling what others are feeling, being able to share in the feelings of others, and it could be with regard to happy feelings as well as unhappy feelings, right? So when we see someone looking happy, we feel happy too. We feel someone sad, we see someone looking sad, we feel sad too. So it's just kind of picking up on and sharing in what others are experiencing. And compassion is based on empathy, and it arises when we notice somebody is unhappy or in pain. Okay, so it arises when we notice that kind of feeling in somebody. But it's more than just knowing that they are suffering. It also includes the wish to help them. So it goes beyond empathy. It goes further than empathy. Because empathy, we might just feel someone suffering, but not necessarily want to do anything about it. Yeah. So, I mean, there are other people who have different explanations about empathy and compassion, but that's how it's explained in that book. And there's some research that has been done that shows Mathieu Ricard, who's a Buddhist monk, French Buddhist monk, and a former scientist, and he's been involved in some of the research, going into an MRI machine and having to meditate inside of an MRI machine with all these, what are those things called? Electrodes attached to his head. And I guess it's really noisy. I've never been in an MRI machine, but they say it's incredibly noisy. And it can also be really claustrophobic. So to stay in an MRI machine for an hour and meditate, that's quite an achievement in itself. But anyway, he's done that. And so they've measured his brain waves. And so there was one experiment where they asked him to meditate for an hour just on empathy, just empathy alone, without compassion. And he did that, and he was thinking of some cases of suffering that he was aware of and just empathizing with the suffering. And he said it was unbearable to just feel the suffering without moving on to compassion. And so then, they stopped that and they said, now meditate for an hour on compassion. And he was very happy to move on to that because, then he was, thinking of these beings who were suffering, but also involved, imagining himself helping them, taking care of them, doing things for them. And he was so happy to be able to do that. And he felt like he just could have gone on and on and on doing that. It was very joyful rather than unbearable. So not only did he have a different subjective experience when he was meditating on empathy and compassion, but the brain activity that they noticed, and the what do they call it? I guess anyway, whatever they were using to check his brain activity. They could see different parts of the brain were active. When he was just meditating on empathy, the parts of the brain that are related more with painful feelings, painful emotions, those were active. Whereas when he was meditating on compassion, the parts of the brain related with love and other positive emotions were active. So they could see that, in terms of the brain, different parts of the brain were active, were lighting up compared when meditating on empathy or compassion. So that shows there's difference between them. But others might have other opinions. But this is significant because people sometimes talk about compassion burnout. And what Mathieu said, and others have said, is that it's actually not possible to get burned out with compassion. If you really have compassion, you don't get burned out. It's more likely empathy burnout. It's empathy that causes you to get burnout rather than compassion. And so this is one reason why it's so important to have programs to train people in having compassion, especially people in the healthcare professions. They're working with suffering many hours every day. And if they could have more compassion rather than empathy, I mean, empathy is important because it's like a step towards compassion. But if they could learn how to have more compassion, then there's less likelihood of burnout. And they will be able to keep their compassion going and yeah, not get burned out. Does that make sense? That's just the little bit I know about that. But yeah. So, so according to Buddhism, compassion is something that we all have. And I think even animals have compassion. There's lots of stories of animals taking care of other animals, even if it's a different species, not their offspring. Um, and so, of course, there's also plenty of examples of non-compassion, of aggression and harmfulness. But still, um, I think the seeds of compassion are there in the minds of everyone. Sometimes they might get buried under a lot of other stuff, but they do exist. And so there's always the possibility to tap into those seeds and cultivate compassion and feel compassion, have compassion, given the right causes, conditions, circumstances. Um, so what we do in Buddhism is we have methods for meditation methods for cultivating compassion, and we work on those and learn to have compassion for more and more people. And some people might have difficulty getting in touch with feelings of compassion in themselves. But one thing that could help would be to bring to mind examples of other people who have a lot of compassion and act out of compassion. So there's like so many people. We don't always hear about them in the news, unfortunately. The news has tendency to focus on all the negative things, the bombs and the murders and the wars and the violence and so on. And, but I really think that there's more compassion, more acts of kindness and compassion in the world than there are acts of violence. But it just doesn't get reported in the news. I mean, most people take care of each other, are kind to each other. Parents taking care of their children, and then adult children taking care of their parents when they're elderly, family members taking care of each other, people taking care of their neighbors, their pets. So human beings, if you just look, we do take care of each other. And even when we're not taking care of each other, we're not harming each other, right? We leave each other alone. So it's actually unusual. It's kind of abnormal for someone to do an act of violence against another human being or another living being. I think relatively that is less common than either caring for or just leaving alone. Right? So when you think about the 8+ billion human beings on this planet, I think most of them are not doing acts of violence and horrible things to other people. What do you think? I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever done statistics on this. It would be hard. But, just kind of thinking about what most people are doing in their life, right? Hmm? Yeah. So I think that's one thing that we could contemplate, we could think about that could help us to have less despair and um, worry and anxiety about what's going on in the world. If we just remind ourselves that most people aren't dropping bombs or murdering or, you know, raping or blowing up or doing things like that. Most people are not doing those things. It's a minority, thankfully. Yeah. So, yeah, so I was trying to point out that, yeah, if you just think about people who are acting out compassion, taking care of others, like all, people in the healthcare profession, doctors, nurses, psychologists, social workers, and so on. And and then there's also a lot of organizations that provide aid for those who are really in need, like Doctors Without Borders and the Red Cross and I don't know, so many organizations, and there seem to be more and more all the time. I get emails from them and letters from them asking for donations. I mean, I would love to be able to donate to all of them, but yeah, there's just so many. And also animals, yeah, all the organizations taking care of animals. Yeah. Somehow I got on the mailing list of this organization called Rolda. I forget what the acronym, but it's something about Romania. This American woman was in Romania many years ago and just came across this dog in a park that was just in terrible conditions. And she just has so much compassion. She loves dogs. So she took care of this dog. And then that started this whole project of taking care of abandoned and mistreated dogs in Romania. And then it spread to other countries in Europe. And so she's got this whole project to rescue animals, dogs, but also cats and other animals that have been mistreated or just have no one like taking care of them and they're starving and sick and so on. So anyway, that's just one example, but there's many, many organizations like that of people just dedicating their lives to taking care of those in need, not just human beings, but other beings as well, like animals. So reading about those projects and what they're doing, those are acts of compassion. So that can help us get in touch with compassion, observing others who are acting compassionately. And then also, we've probably been on the receiving end of others' compassion. Yeah. So if we could think of times in our life when maybe we were depressed or sick or yeah, just experiencing difficulties, and there was someone or some people who noticed how we were feeling and were concerned about us and reached out to us and did what they could to help us, showing compassion to us. So we can bring those to mind and try to get a sense of what was going on in this other person's mind, then that can help us to get in touch with compassion in ourselves. But we ourselves have most probably felt compassion. Times when we saw a person or an animal that was sick, in pain, suffering, dying, and we just felt something here. We just felt moved by that suffering and wanted to relieve it, wanted to do something to help. So that's the feeling of compassion. So I'm sure we've all experienced it, at least sometimes. I think everyone does experience it at least sometimes. And there's this story I like to share. It was a story told by one inmate in a prison, and he's a Buddhist, a Dharma practitioner, and trying to meditate in a very difficult place, prison. And is that there was another prisoner that he didn't like, and this guy, he thought of him as a thug, and he even had a tattoo on his arm saying "thug." You know what a thug is? It's like someone who's kind of very violent and picking fights, and yeah, and so the inmate telling the story, kind of didn't like this person very much and had labeled him, mentally labeled this guy a thug and someone I want to stay away from, someone I don't like. Then he happened to see that other prisoner one day pushing another inmate in a wheelchair. The one in the wheelchair was kind of an elderly man and very weak and obviously in a lot of pain, suffering. And so I saw this thug pushing this guy in a wheelchair and just showing him a lot of kindness, like putting his hand on his head because he sounded like he had a fever or something, and just taking care, being attentive and caring to the guy in the wheelchair. And he was like so surprised. It was so out of character. The way he had the label he had put on that person, it just didn't fit. And so it was for him a teaching not to label people, not to get fixed ideas about people and think that's how they are and they're always like that and so on. But I think that story also shows that, even hardened criminals, people who have committed murders and other kind of violent crimes and they're in prison in really difficult conditions, that they have compassion too. They have some soft spot inside, and maybe because of the circumstances in their life, they developed the way they are. Many, what I've heard is, I haven't done statistics on this, but many of the people who end up in prison having committed violent crimes, if you look at their childhood, their background, their childhood, they had horrific experiences. And so, yeah, they just reacted or developed certain habits as a result of their upbringing, their life experiences, and ended up in prison. But it doesn't mean they're bad. They made some mistakes, and now they're in a situation where maybe they make even more mistakes because they don't have really good conditions to help them grow their compassion. But they do have the seeds of compassion there inside. And in fact, I was just recently reading this book. Tupten Chodron put together this book called The Key of Compassion, or The Key to Compassion. I think it's The Key of Compassion. And it's about the work that she's been doing with inmates for several decades, um, they write letters, and then she sends replies and sends materials, sometimes visits prisons. There's actually quite a few projects like that of Buddhist monastics and teachers going into prisons and teaching inmates. And there's just amazing stories about how some of these inmates just completely turn their life around and start meditating and practicing compassion and nonviolence and really beautiful. So that, yeah, those stories are proof that everyone does have the possibility of experiencing compassion. If we get the right conditions, the right causes and conditions together, then we can all experience it. And it's also important to understand the difference between compassion and personal distress. And there's some other states of mind that are kind of similar to compassion, but not exactly. So, personal distress is when we see or hear about some tragedy or some suffering someone's experiencing, but we get overly emotional. We have feelings of sadness, maybe anxiety, worry, despair, and our mind may be more focused on our own suffering, our own pain, rather than on the suffering of the other. And and the mind can become like unclear and unbalanced. So then it's not able to really think clearly about how to act, what to do, what would be the most effective way to help in this situation. You just get kind of frazzled and, you know, you want to do something, but you can't think clearly what to do, and what you do may not be helpful. It may even make things worse rather than better. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever been that way? So that's not compassion. I mean, there may be a bit of compassion there because you do notice suffering and you do want to help the suffering, but you get overwhelmed by distress, despair. So with genuine compassion, this is the ideal situation. With genuine compassion, you're able to stay calm and clear and focused, so you can focus on what will be most helpful in this situation. So some people might be able to do that naturally, but others may take time to learn how to do that. I like the example of His Holiness the Dalai Lama because I see him as someone who has an enormous amount of compassion. But he doesn't, I've never seen him look upset or worried or frazzled. And he's always smiling, laughing, joking. And you look at his life, and he's had difficult experiences. I mean, his country, the country he was responsible for, the ruler of, it was taken over by this neighbor with huge armies and weapons and so on. And so the Tibetans really didn't have a chance to defend themselves. And then just horrific things happening in the country, just so many people killed and starved and beaten and tortured and imprisoned and so on. And he had to leave and go into exile. So it's been a difficult life, right? It hasn't been an easy life. And there's continuous problems, ongoing problems. Just today I met Chuck, an old friend, and he told me, I hadn't heard this before, but he said recently China made a law that bans the teaching of indigenous languages like Tibetan. I don't remember how many minority groups there are in China, but China has said those languages will no longer be taught. Everyone has to, only Han Chinese can be taught. Oh, that's terrible. The Tibetan. language not being able to be taught in its own country. So, yeah, lots of awful things in his life. But, he doesn't get depressed. He always maintains optimism and hope and compassion. He's consistently advocated nonviolence, even though there's some Tibetans who wanted to fight. He said, no, our way is to be nonviolent. And just very, very strong uh, sense of compassion and ethics and nonviolence. And I've heard him say that when Tibetans come out of Tibet, people who have been in Tibet and experienced some tragedies, and then they leave and they come to India and they meet him, and they'll sometimes tell these really sad stories about losses and terrible things that have happened to them, and they'll be crying. And he says he cries too, but only for a short time. And then he regains his composure and his mind. He says, kind of underneath his the surface of his mind, it's always calm and clear. And I think that comes from wisdom, balancing compassion with wisdom. So I think that's the way to stay balanced and not be overwhelmed by emotions. But that's the ideal. Not easy to do, but the ideal to work towards. And then another state of mind that can seem like compassion but isn't really compassion is pity. Although the Oxford Dictionary says those two are synonymous, compassion and pity. But Stephen Levine, who he's passed away now, but he did a lot of work with dying people and wrote books about that. He explained the difference between compassion and pity. He said, compassion, what is it? How does it go? When our love touches another's suffering, that is compassion. When our fear touches another's suffering, that is pity. So compassion is more aligned with love, loving kindness, whereas pity is more about fear. And the way I relate to that is I can see this in myself sometimes when you see someone who's suffering or you hear about some suffering and it's scary. Yeah, that suffering is scary. And you kind of, you're concerned, but you don't want to get too close. You might get it yourself. You might be affected yourself. So there's some fear and self wanting to protect oneself. And so, yeah, that's how I see the difference between them. So compassion involves courage, being willing to step in, take risks, and just go for it to help when needed. Like rescue workers, right? They put their lives at risk to take care of others and help others. So ideally, compassion is inclusive of all people and all beings. We don't exclude anyone. I mean, this is the ideal in Buddhism, is to have compassion for all living beings, all sentient beings without exception. Of course, that's very difficult to do in reality, but that's the goal that we work towards, to not make the decision, I will have compassion for all of these people, but not them, right? I exclude them from my compassion. So even if we find it difficult to have compassion for certain people, certain individuals, then it's good to at least feel, right now I can't manage that. But one day I would like to. One day I would like to have compassion for them and work towards that. So when it comes to victims, people who've been hurt, caused harm, then it's not too difficult to have compassion because we can see their suffering. It's like very obvious. But then when it comes to the perpetrators, the ones who did the things that made them suffer, that's very difficult. That's challenging. Um, so according to Buddhism, they deserve compassion too because they are suffering too. Their suffering may not be as obvious as with the victims of the harmful actions, but if we understand, according to Buddhism, um, unenlightened beings, ordinary unenlightened beings, have within our minds a lot of afflictions, afflictive emotions like anger and greed and jealousy and pride and uh, ignorance, confusion about the true nature of things. We don't see things clearly or correctly. And we see things in distorted ways. So this is why we're unenlightened, because we have these afflictions, afflictive emotions in our mind. And so we all have them, right? If we're honest with ourselves, then we acknowledge, yeah, I have anger and I have this and I have that. Um, so it's just part of being an unenlightened being. And when it comes to perpetrators of violence and harm, um, I mean, I don't have clairvoyance. I can't look into their minds, but you can kind of get a sense of what's going on in their minds. That, they're under the influence of very strong afflictions, delusions, um, hatred, a lot of hatred, anger, and greed, selfishness, self-centeredness, jealousy, competitiveness, and so on. Lots of very strong, intense delusions, disturbing emotions, and ignorance. Not just ignorance about the true nature of things, ultimate truth, ultimate reality, but ignorance about karma. That's another kind of ignorance that doesn't understand the relationship between actions we do and results we experience. And so thinking that, oh, it's okay to drop a bomb, it's okay to kill a bunch of people, to send drones and, destroy people's houses and hospitals and so on. It's okay. No, no problem. I can do that. And maybe they can. They can get away with it now. But according to karma, yeah, you're creating karma. When you do harmful things, you cause death, you cause suffering, um, you're creating some very negative karma. And yeah, doing those kind of actions again and again and again, you're really piling up a lot of bad karma. And according to Buddhism, then you're creating the cause to experience suffering yourself. Like the things you're doing to others are going to happen to you, and maybe even worse, maybe even double, triple, 100 times worse. So, so if you can accept karma, that actions we do bring results that we will experience later on, and you think about the kind of karma they are creating, then they really deserve suffer. They really deserve compassion. Lama Zopa Rinpoche told the story of one Tibetan Geshe, Tibetan Lama, who would cry out of compassion whenever he thought about Mao Zedong, which is kind of like a Jew crying for Hitler, right? Because Mao Zedong, sent the armies into Tibet and was, responsible for all the awful things that happened in Tibet. And so this Geshe would just contemplate the karma created by Mao Zedong and where what's happening to him right now. He's probably experiencing a huge amount of suffering because of what he did. So, so that's something to think about. And that's probably the best way to generate compassion for those who perpetrate harm, who cause suffering to others. If you think about the karma they're creating and the suffering they will experience in the future if they don't purify that karma. But even at the time that they are doing those actions, right? The time they're sending the bombs, the drones, the committing a murder, what's going on in their mind? What kind of mind, what kind of experience do they have? Is it a peaceful, happy, beautiful state of mind? I mean, we can just look at our own experience. We all experience anger sometimes. We all have thoughts of doing harmful things. And so if we can remember what our mind was like at that time and ask ourselves, was that a nice state of mind? Was that a happy, peaceful state of mind, a beautiful state of mind, one that I would want to have again, again, again? Hopefully, we'll be able to recognize no, that was really painful, really disturbing, really unpleasant. Okay. So if you have trouble believing in karma and believing in the future suffering that would be experienced by someone doing harm, then just think about what experience they're having while they're doing those harmful things. Yeah. Is that a good state of mind? Are they really happy? Are they genuinely happy? I don't think so. So those are contemplations you can do to try to overcome barriers to having compassion for harm doers. I mean, it could take a while to think about these things and get beyond the anger, because that's our normal reaction. Our normal reaction is kind of the opposite of compassion. We think they should suffer. They deserve to suffer. They're making others suffer, so they should suffer. Um, so that's the opposite of compassion. So it can take a while to um, work on overcoming those obstacles and being able to feel compassion. But that's the key. The key is to understand that they are not happy people. Their minds are not happy and peaceful. And what they're doing, the actions they are doing, are bringing them to situations where they will have even more suffering. um, Another thing I find helpful that may not work for others, but because I do believe in Buddhas, enlightened beings, and bodhisattvas, those who are on the way to enlightenment, and that they have compassion for everybody. In their minds, there's no anger, no hatred, no negative feelings towards anybody, only love and compassion. Somehow I believe that. I mean, looking at the examples of the Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I've met many wonderful teachers who show that kind of compassion that reaches everybody. And so I do believe that's possible. So I think about the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and try to put myself in their position, their situation, like their state of mind, and how they would look at those perpetrators of harm, the bad guys. Do they feel angry? Do they feel hatred? Do they feel aversion? Do they wish them to suffer? No. They have nothing but compassion. And yeah, they can clearly see how those beings are suffering, creating even more suffering for themselves. And so they really, really want to help them. It's, I guess, maybe a similar example would be, say, parents, if they have a number of children and maybe one child is quite difficult, often doing naughty things and getting themselves into trouble and harming others. If they're really loving, caring parents, they still love that child, and they suffer. They want their child to be happy and to not suffer. And so it's like really painful for them to see their child living that way, being that way. And they really want to do everything they can to help their child move in a more positive direction. So I think that's similar to how the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas feel. They love all living beings, just like parents loving their children. And the naughty ones, the ones who are going astray and doing all these harmful things, they, they do have the potential to change. They have the potential to be different than they are and even become enlightened. Everyone has the potential to be enlightened. So they're just going in the wrong direction, and they want to bring them back and help them go in the right direction towards enlightenment, real peace and happiness. So if I find it hard to feel compassion for someone, then I just try to think about the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and how they view that person. And that helps me to have a softer mind. And I feel that's the way I want to be too. I want to have that way of thinking, that way of feeling. One day, hopefully, I'll be there. So it does take time to and effort to generate compassion for all living beings. We can't expect that to happen quickly and easily. Um, and if we understand the benefits, if we can see the benefits of compassion, then that will help us feel more enthusiastic, have more energy to do it. And so in the Buddhist scriptures, there's mention of the benefits of both love, loving kindness, and compassion. And the research done by scientists, recent years, confirms some of these. So the Buddhist scriptures say that our mind will be more happy. And we can see this for ourselves. We feel better about ourselves when we have love and compassion rather than anger and hatred. And it's also good for our health. Our body, our health will improve if we have more positive feelings. And we ourselves will be loved by others. Yeah, if we're someone who's kind and compassionate and caring, then people will care about us and want to help us when we need help. Yeah, you can see that. Lots of people want to take care of the Dalai Lama. But when it comes to someone who's like a murderer, someone who does a lot of harmful things, well, some people might want to help that person, but a lot of people just want to stay away, maybe want that person dead. Yeah, so if we show compassion and love, then we will receive that from others. We'll sleep better and have more pleasant dreams, not nightmares, and wake up refreshed. Our appearance will be radiant, relaxed, yeah, smiling, peaceful. And our ability to communicate with others will be better if we have more compassion and love as opposed to anger, hatred. Our mind will be more peaceful and able to concentrate. So if we want to practice meditation and develop our ability to stay concentrated, then compassion and love are conducive for that. Anger makes your mind disturbed and agitated, very hard to concentrate. And that's not just for meditation, but also in our work or other activities that we do. You can probably see that yourself. If you're feeling angry, it's very hard to concentrate and get your work done, right? So then we can accomplish our goals more easily. And then at the end of our life, if we can live our life with compassion and kindness, then at the end of our life, we'll be able to die with a positive state of mind, clear and peaceful and positive. And the next life will be a good one, a fortunate one. Dying with anger, in an angry state of mind, is not good. Not a good way to die, and also not good for the next life. So, yeah, contemporary research confirms some of these benefits, like the benefits for our health, our physical health, and less stress, better able to communicate with others, less loneliness, depression, and also improved resilience. It's another benefit, learning how to bounce back when there's difficulties in life. So we can also just do our own research, just looking at our own experiences and compare when we're angry, hateful, having negative feelings towards others, as opposed to kind and caring and compassionate. So what effects that those states of mind have on our life, on our health, on our state of mind, and our relationships. So let's do a meditation on compassion. Then, yeah, if there's questions, I'll be happy to do my best to answer. So make yourselves comfortable. If you want to sit cross-legged, you can get cushions and yeah, they just put out chairs tonight, but so whichever way you're sitting, whether you're sitting cross-legged or in a chair, try to keep your back straight, but relaxed. Let your body be as relaxed as possible, not tight or tense. That includes your shoulders. Let your shoulders relax. And since it's getting kind of late and you might be feeling tired, it might be better not to close your eyes all the way, but leave them open a little bit and have your gaze directed downwards, looking on the floor in front of you or some place in front of you. That way there's light coming in and that can help us stay awake, alert. So let's start by getting in touch with the feeling of compassion. So you could do this by remembering a time when you felt compassion for another person or another being, like an animal. Or if you have difficulty remembering the experience of compassion yourself, you could bring to mind someone else who was showing compassion, a story that you heard, or someone you observed acting in a compassionate way, and bring that to mind and see if you can get a feeling for that state of mind of compassion. So, compassion is when there's awareness of suffering, some kind of suffering, physical or emotional or both, and our heart is moved, and we want to see that suffering end, and we want to do what we can, if possible, to end it. So now let's work on increasing that feeling of compassion, feeling it for more people. So bring to mind someone you know who is suffering. It doesn't have to be something major, but maybe they're just feeling unhappy, depressed, worried, or unwell, have some physical problem. Imagine that person in front of you, as if they're right here in front of you. Think about what they're experiencing and generate the wish for them to be free of their suffering. You could say to yourself words like, may you be free of suffering, or how wonderful it would be if you could be free of your suffering. So use whatever words work for you. Just repeat those a few times to yourself and just really try to have the feeling of compassion for that person. And then try the same with another person, maybe someone you're not so close to, you don't know so well. Could be a distant relative or neighbor or someone you heard about, read about on the news. So bring to mind someone like that. Imagine them in front of you. And then generate the feeling of compassion for that person, understanding that they have suffering, physical or mental or both. And generate the wish for them to be free of their suffering. And if you find it helpful, you can repeat those words like, May you be free of suffering, or how wonderful if you could be free of suffering. Now let's try someone we don't like very much. Don't think of your worst enemy or someone who's done really terrible things, but think of someone you just have a low level of dislike for. You find them annoying or irritating. So think of someone like that. Imagine them in front of you. And contemplate that this person also has suffering. Their life isn't 100% wonderful and perfect. Even if they're well to do, comfortable, but in their mind, they probably have disturbing emotions. They get angry, annoyed, jealous, irritated. They probably have lots of thoughts and emotions that are unpleasant. Maybe they don't like themselves very much, or they feel inferior to certain people, competitive with others, and so on. Anxious, worried. And as long as we have a body, a physical body, there's always things that go wrong with the body. Aches and pains, aging, injuries. Now see if you can generate compassion for this person. And it may be difficult, but try to at least say the words expressing compassion, like, may you be free of your suffering, or I wish you could be free of suffering. How nice it would be if you could be free of suffering. So use whatever words are most comfortable for you. Now try opening your heart really wide and generating compassion for everyone, every living being. Everyone wants to be happy and free of suffering. Nobody wants to suffer. Just see if you can think and feel how wonderful it would be if all people, all beings everywhere could be free of all their suffering and causes of suffering. So the meditation for meditate generating compassion involves bringing to mind different people, and they say start with someone who is suffering, someone you know who is suffering, and generate compassion for them, and then move on to someone you know and like and care about and generate compassion for them. Then, when you're more familiar with compassion for relatively easy people, then you can bring to mind a little bit more difficult ones like strangers, people you don't know very well. And then with more practice, you can work on the difficult ones. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to wait a long time before you try to have compassion for difficult people. You can try that early on. But they say it's just easier that way, that you start with easier objects and work gradually on more and more difficult ones. And then it just gets easier then when it comes to the really difficult ones to have compassion because your mind is just more familiar with that state of mind, thinking that way, feeling that way. So, any questions anyone has? You can also, people online can also ask questions. Oh, yeah.
However, and I don't really know if it's into words in the right way, but like when you see all the suffering in the world, especially right now, there's almost so
Hang on. She would like you to.
oh god,
It's for the people online.
keep going right.
They can hear. Yeah, you don't have to repeat everything, but just,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's loud.
Yeah.
um, no, I was just wondering, with all the suffering in the world, um, it feels very hard to understand where to start because compassion, as you laid it out, especially as opposed to just pure empathy, also involves acting, right? It involves getting active for that person to try and help end their suffering. I mean, at least ideally. So how to really find that balance and yeah, I don't know. I come to a way where you feel like you yeah, I don't know where to. makes you happy. Not that
Well,
it's about that, but yeah.
we have to know what we are capable of doing and not expect ourselves to do more than we're capable of. Like I would love to stop the war in Ukraine, but I can't do that. Lots of people are trying to do it and they can't. And so, there's certain situations where we would wish this suffering to end, but it's beyond our ability to do that, to make that happen. So then we just say, okay, well, what can I do? I can send donations to aid organizations that are on the ground and helping out. I can support efforts to end the war. So there are certain things we are able to do that will hopefully bring about a relief of the suffering, even if we can't eliminate it all. So compassion does involve the wish to benefit. And if there's a person right in front of you or a puppy right in front of you that's crying, then of course you can act to help them. But with all the suffering in the world of all the people and all the beings, it's just not possible where we are right now. And I mean, in Mahayana Buddhism, particularly, we have this ideal of the Bodhisattva path and eventually enlightenment, becoming a Buddha. So we work on cultivating love and compassion for all living beings and wanting to bring all beings to happiness and relieve their suffering. But we know we can't do that right now. But we see that there is a way to do that. If I develop myself, I develop my qualities and follow the path, then eventually I can become a Buddha, at which time I will be able to help all living beings. And you don't have to wait until you're Buddha to be able to help others. You can be helping others along the way, and your ability to help others does increase as you move along the path. So we generate compassion and then we direct our energy. Of course, we do what we can now, but we also see that there is this long-term goal that we are working towards, we're putting our energy into. So, and that helps us to not feel like hopeless and in despair, like, oh, there's nothing I can do about all these people suffering in Ukraine. I mean, that's not completely true. Um, I can cultivate my love and my compassion and create the causes to progress along the Bodhisattva path so that I can help them, even if I can't help them right now in this lifetime. In the future, I would like to be able to help them. So we have this sort of vision, long-term vision that goes over numerous lifetimes and developing our bodhisattva qualities and realizations so that we can be of greater and greater benefit to others as we go along. And so that gives us something. I mean, a cynic might say, well, what good does that do to these people who are suffering right now? Well, it may not help them immediately, but in the future. And but I also feel that, yeah, if we are cultivating these qualities of love and compassion and trying to live our life in that way, we are influencing others, the people we meet. And if more and more people can be cultivating these qualities and living according to these qualities, then the energy does spread. And who knows, maybe it does have an effect on, the world at large. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Does. Thank you.
Yeah. This afternoon I was watching a YouTube interview with the monk that led the peace walk, um, what did they call it? The peace walk, walk for peace. Yeah. I was just so moved by that. I thought that whole project was just extraordinary. And you could see how it affected so many people. I mean, they were just walking, right? walking with her dog and not giving speeches. I mean, I think eventually they did start talking to people, but they were just doing their own thing, walking and letting people know they were walking for peace. Nothing political about it, but just, I mean, it had such an extraordinary effect on so many people. He was saying that sometimes when people would come up to them, usually women, and say, "You saved my life," and tell the story how they were on the verge of suicide. They were ready to end their life. And seeing what these monks were doing, how they just kept going in spite of whatever weather conditions there were, just going and going and going, just gave them a sense of hope to carry on despite whatever difficulties they were experiencing. So just them going on this walk. I mean, it was extraordinary what they did. But still, it just, and I guess social media, I mean, millions of people around the world were following them and inspired by them and just, they got hope. They got, yeah, help them to cultivate courage and compassion and love. So that kind of shows how, if we practice these qualities ourselves and live according to those qualities ourselves, we can have a lot of effect on others. So that's all we do. I mean, we don't say, "Oh, I'm going to end all war and I'm going to end all murder and all violence." I mean, that it just isn't possible. But we do what we can and we keep cultivating our ability to do more and more and more all the time. Does that make sense? Because it's so, I mean, for me, it's just so clear that if you fall into despair, I mean, I did when I was young, when I was a teenager, I was really depressed about things going on in the world. The Vietnam War, racism, just a lot of awful things happening. And yeah, I felt suicidal sometimes. And I just don't want to be here anymore. I'm glad I didn't do that. Um, but it's just so clear to me that letting your mind go into that state is just a dead end. Doesn't do you any good, doesn't do anybody any good at all. So it's like we have to find a way to not let that happen and to keep our minds positive, optimistic, and cultivate these qualities of compassion and love. So for me, the Buddha, yeah, my life was saved by the Buddha's teachings and the Buddhist practices, that they really helped me. And when we receive help from them, then we are in a better position to help others. But if you become depressed and despair, you're not really helping anybody, including yourself. So, yeah. Anyone else?
I was wondering what you might think about His Holiness's movie, Wisdom of Happiness. And
I don't think, is that the newest one?
I it's the one that Richard Gere has been helping to distribute.
I think it's the recent.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
haven't
yeah.
seen that one. I haven't seen
Oh,
it.
you have to see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, someone at the Abbey got a copy and they were going to play it at one point, but it hadn't happened yet.
Anyway, he talks about compassion a lot. Yes. And one of the things that I thought was really inspiring to me was how he really promoted women as um, having strong innate compassion because of having to care for little ones in birth and family. And he also was saying that we should try to make them the leaders of the
Mhm.
countries in the world because they wouldn't be using as much anger, aggression,
Making
and
war.
and making wars. And I thought, wow, well, that's something I could work on.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a very strong feminist promotion thing he
Oh,
did.
he's been saying that for years. He's been talking like that for years and years. He's really into women. I mean, promoting women. And like, in Tibet, Tibetan nuns mostly had no chance of education. They didn't get an education. It was always the monks who got education. The nuns would just recite prayers. And when they came into India, I think it's mainly his incentive was to have education for the nuns. And so this is now at the point where we have nun geshis
Yes.
who got like these degrees, PhD degrees, and they're doing everything the monks are doing, studying science and so on. And so I think that's mainly his promoting that. And yeah, talks a lot about his mother. His mother, taught him compassion and love just by being a really loving person. And but don't they also say that in science? They say that women have more oxytocin, that's kind of hormone, because yeah, we bear children and take that's what we're supposed to do anyway. That's what our bodies are for. We
Yeah.
don't always have children, but yeah, we have the bodies that are made for that. So yeah, we have natural compassion. And yeah, there were more women in roles of leadership,
Mm-hmm.
maybe less wars. Although Margaret Thatcher,
Yeah,
well,
there were a few exceptions. As there always are
yeah, not
exceptions.
all women are are so soft and gentle. But yeah,
That's really helpful. Thank you.
empowering, isn't it?
It's
Encouraging,
very
empowering.
empowering,
That
and um, Amy Klobuchar is one of the rising women that is now hopefully going to be governor of um, the state they were just persecuting,
Minnesota.
Minnesota,
Uh,
Minnesota, and hopefully more women will rise and be able to be supported around compassion.
mm,
And I just love that His Holiness is publicly making that so clear in
mm,
this movie. Uh,
mm,
many people are hearing it.
mm.
Uh,
Thank you, Venerable. So my question was about the intersection wisdom and compassion. So one of the people that came up for me when you said choose a person is a friend. We've been friends for 40 years. Okay. So we were young when we became friends. Now 40 years later, we're bodies are aging. And I'm finding it challenging to interact with her at sometimes because there's always a litany of everything that's wrong and wrong with her body, wrong in her life. And sometimes I feel like if I ask her, how are you? I'm just enabling this flow of complaints.
Mm,
So I guess I think what I got from your talk was perhaps I just prepare myself with compassion before I'm going to have a conversation with her,
mm,
because because I wind up feeling lost. Like, am I as a friend for 40 years? Am I supposed to point out your mind is so negative all the time, or and I don't think she'd take that well, so that's
mm,
probably not a good idea. But I'm like, I want to suggest her to take antidepressants. I get confused about that stuff.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a difficult situation. And I don't know, I suppose you try to make suggestions sometimes about things that she might do that would help her. But yeah. Sometimes that people are like that. Um, I guess what I would do, I'm not a very patient person, so I would have a hard time staying a long time with someone like that and listening to it. I mean, I might just give a limited amount of time, but not just sit there for hours and hours listening to that. I would probably say, I'm sorry, but I need to go. I have to do something. So, yeah, if you know that you have a limited amount of time and limited amount of patience, then you could, just spend a certain amount of time, but not more than you can manage. So know your limitations and yeah, difficult with people like that if they, I don't know, um don't want to take steps to manage their problems on their own, like maybe work on their mind or seek help from therapists or whatever. It's often difficult. So I don't really know what else to say. But you do have to take care of your mind as well and your time and your energy. And we can always, meditate on compassion and make prayers and dedications for people that we know who are ill, and it may not be possible to immediately give help to them, like if she's not open to what you offer, what you have to offer, but on your own, when you do your own practice and prayers and so on, dedicate for her. And here, I'm sure the center also does prayers that can be dedicated to her. So that's helping on the spiritual level. I don't know if that's helpful or not. So we'll have to end here, but thank you for giving me the chance to talk about compassion, one of my favorite subjects. And so let's just take a few moments to mentally dedicate the merit, the positive energy that we've created coming together to think about, meditate on this beautiful topic. So, by this merit, may all living beings find peace and happiness and freedom from suffering, and may they all find their way along the path that leads to complete liberation and ultimately to enlightenment. And especially may they learn to stop having anger and hatred and acting in hateful ways and harmful ways, and learn to treat others with kindness and compassion. Okay, thank you.